no living British citizen was part of the slave trade, you know, and we're not responsible, any of us living today, for the crimes of dead slave traders. So why are we being asked to apologize, to pay reparations? Writing someone a check is not going to undo what someone feels about their history.
What if we're still profiting from it?
But we all profit. That people all over the world are living a life that they may not have led if, you know, if slaves hadn't been used. Okay, we know that.
Yasmin disagrees.
Every building built by slaves.
This from someone. Okay, you live in a country. Listen, can I speak? You live in a country which, after the First World War, Germany was absolutely forced to pay reparations, and they're still paying off. Oh, the Brits don't worry about that. They've never said, oh well, living young Germans had nothing to do with that. Japan was made to pay huge reparation bills. Somehow Britain, when called upon to at least make a gesture, the royals actually benefited hugely. So did Tate and Lyle. So I find it so extraordinary that's when you disengage.
But they lost a war, Japan and Germany.
Yeah, yes, reparations was insisted on. Nobody said, okay, we're going to forget this. It happened. It's history. When it suits us, right? And, you know, I think Jamaica, I have a lot of Jamaican friends, they wouldn't have been this exercised because they have been fond of the royals. Without the Windrush scandal. That really shocked them.
Something odd is happening with this trip. I don't quite get it. I can't work out. Firstly, this idea that a letter has been written by 100 Jamaican leaders, that sounds like a lot of people, but then 100 leaders, and then the other thing is, I thought William and Kate had people saying, look, watch, this is going to be a tricky one. But obviously nobody said that to them. So they keep going to places where they're told they're not welcome.
Well, I think Barbados started something by declaring itself a republic and dissociating from that. So, but I think the Windrush scandal has had a real impact.
But, you know, now
bobsleighing, by the way.
It seems crazy to me that we're making moral judgments today in the 21st century about what happened 200 years. You know, we had Tony Blair apologising for the potato famine, saying, what was he said? He was expressed his sorrow and regret for something that happened a century before he was born.
But I think that's
nonsense. It's empty gesture politics.
Carol, that's decency.
It's not
absolutely decency.
No, it isn't. It's empty gesture. It's
Do
words.
You know that the effects of slavery are still playing out among Black Americans and in the Caribbean? It isn't over for them.
So you think, how do you think writing a check is
extraordinary?
How is writing a check going to solve their problem?
Oh, I think
what they might feel in the head. A little bit. How? Tell me how. Explain how.
It is one of the poorest countries in the world.
So you think that, never mind, because it's one of the poorest countries. How is it going to help what they feel about slavery? How is it going to change what they feel?
They will feel it has been acknowledged.
That's what
you can't just
you don't acknowledge things with money.
I'm sorry.
Show you care.
I'm sorry. You can't just dismiss a history because it doesn't agree with you.
You know, I'm pretty sure that the next generation, our descendants, are going to talk about us in the way we're now talking about what happened 200 years ago. You know, are they going to talk about? Are they going to criticise us for burning fossil fuels? Are they going to criticise us for letting kids have sex changes and start taking hormones aged 14?
Was it?
So we're going. Every age has wrongdoing.
My question was just that was it that long ago? And here's why I asked that. I was born in 1965. Lincoln was shot in 1865. So only 100 years before I was born. He's the guy who said, we're not having slavery in the state. It doesn't seem, suddenly to me now, it doesn't seem that long ago.
But let's just get over this myth. There were people in this country, women in particular, who while the slave trade was going on, absolutely opposed it on moral grounds. The Quakers in America and here.
But we got out ahead of
our sensibility.
But that's the point.
They knew.
But we got out ahead of the States, didn't we, on some of this stuff? You
had the abolition with William, but actually, by that time, a lot of women weren't buying sugar because they thought, and what's his name, the potter. The famous potter,
Woodward. Well, hang on, Stoke. Yeah. Is it Wedgwood?
They made these beautiful plaques of slaves looking up and messages saying this is wrong.
Okay.
They knew.
All right. So it's still very current for some.
Hello, Africans. I hope you're doing fine where you are. So there are people with whom, man is an evil being. Man is an evil being. And God says the heart of man is very deceitful. Very deceitful. And it is only him who knows the heart of man. So man is a very, very deceitful and a very, very dangerous being, right? But you see, we can't just live in being bad. We should work ourselves to being better, right? We should work ourselves to being better versions. Just because we are evil beings, we shouldn't stay evil. We should work to become better human beings. And that is what religious text calls us to do. Religious text calls us to have morality. I'm speaking of Christianity. It calls us to the point of morality. Judaism calls us to the point of morality. I believe Islam as well calls us to the point of morality, right? And morality takes many forms and variations. For instance, if I steal your thing and I give it to my child, right? And maybe I die. Now you go and ask my child to give you back and he refuses. And she says or he says, it is my dad gave it to me, so you should talk to him, but he is not around. See, that logic does not add. The moment you are enjoying loot, you are an accomplice, you are a criminal, because you are enjoying the fruit of loot. You are enjoying someone else's blood. So it really doesn't add up to anything, because it really doesn't add up to reality. It adds up to something which is bad, but not something which is good, right? So I'm speaking of reparations. You see, under the international law, victims of crimes under international law and human right violation have a right to reparations. Yeah? So there's a very interesting video in such a way that the example I gave you between a man and his child and what happens when they pass away and the child still continues to enjoy the loot and does not want to pay back, right? Saying, it is not me who took, it was my father who took it. So that same ideology, that same mindset, I want you to still have it, because we are going to use it to analyze a video right now. We are going to watch this video where a white journalist is facing a white counterpart with whom they are discussing the matter of reparation. One is in support of reparation and the other is not in support of reparations. So I want us to dive in, listen to them. I shall get back by the end of the vid, where we shall also have a deep critical analysis. Let's dive in.
A woke Cambridge University academic has claimed in his new book, Britain's Slavery Debt, that the UK owes £205 billion to Caribbean nations for its role in the slave trade. So, this guy is called Dr. Michael Banner, and his calculation was, obviously rejected by MPs who told him that he wasn't living in the real world. However, the Cambridge Don has called for the Scottish government to show leadership and begin repaying their share of reparations, which stands at £20 billion. Well, there we go. Carol, should Brits be expected to cough up at the behest of a Cambridge Don who, by the way, I was told earlier on, maybe the same person who thought that Jesus was trans?
That makes as much sense as what he said here. I mean, last year some leading international judge said where Britain owed 19 trillion, so at least this one's a bit less. Let's just look at this reparation. The thing about slavery is, it was practiced in every inhabited continent, and all races were part of it. So this reparations argument collapses because there is no one alive today who doesn't have an ancestral link to slavery. So that means we're all due to pay. And this ridiculous notion now that if you have some forefather who was in any way involved in slavery, you are tainted as an evil person who has to repay. It just does not make any sense anymore. No. And you know, you think about it, the slavery in the UK, if we look at what's happening now in this country, currently there are 130,000 modern-day slaves in the UK as we speak.
Exactly my point. Yeah.
And around the world, 29 million. Why aren't we doing something about them? Why aren't the people shouting for reparations of something that happened 200 years ago, dealing with it?
There was a clip that went viral over the weekend, which I've decided not to show here tonight because it is it's beyond the pale, I think, really, but of African slaves, right, being moved from mine to mine and sold off by other Africans, right? And it just makes me think, well, why should I and my family be paying reparations for things that didn't happen in our name?
Africans were some of the biggest slavers in the world.
You know, actually, I do think that this man has a point, because Britain went around the world pillaging countries of their resources, of their people, abusing them and taking that money and that profit back home. And we benefit from generations of that abuse.
So does every country.
But Britain was the country, pardon me, that did it most acutely and most effectively.
And the fact is absolutely historically incorrect. Portugal, for a start. We now have a generation that believes everything we did by colonising. Yes, it is true. They think everything about colonisation was wrong. It wasn't. There were some terrible things and there were some good things to come out of it. And that is about properly acknowledging your past.
Education.
Yes, completely.
Sanitation.
Transportation.
There was so much that we brought to communities. But that is...
But you see, you're typical of what we're talking about.
No, I'm saying that colonisation, the empire was wrong. It was wrong, full stop. That's, you know, the things that Britain might have done.
But that's very much through your modern sensibilities,
you
might say that, because we wouldn't now routinely go into other countries.
It was a profoundly racist set of basically invasions of other people, where we subjugated people to our rule and sort of made them work for us. It was completely
made their countries work.
But imagine yourself in the shoes of a 13-year-old boy hearing you say that.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
What do they then? How do they then carry that through life?
Well,
in terms of who I am as a Brit.
But it's not about...
We had racist ancestors.
But Bev...
But I'm saying that we hear much more of that than we do about the benefits of that period of time.
Well, because I don't think there were benefits. I think that we have to be completely...
Of course there were.
I don't think there were.
There were benefits to us.
A lot of those countries did not... Jonathan, those countries...
It absolutely does.
Those countries did not have money. They did not have the creativity. They did not have people in positions of power
Of course they had creativity in those countries. They just didn't live like Britain did. It doesn't make it worse. It just makes it different.
So it's okay to live without education, and it's okay to live without a transportation system, is it?
They did have education. It just wasn't our education system. They had language. It wasn't our language.
This cultural
medicine we brought to
precisely what we have.
Yes. I don't know. Look, I don't know why we're even.
All right, come on in. Take a seat. Let's talk. Cara Malone has been making her rounds in the media. She's a British commentator who got on national television on one of those networks over there. I can't remember, but it's on the screen. And she got on national television and she said that slavery benefited African countries. She said a lot of other things too, and I'm going to quote them. She said those countries didn't have any money. She said they didn't have creativity. She said they didn't have people in positions of power. She also said they had no education system. She also said they had no transportation system. You want to know the truth? Get my book, Lies America Has Told Black People. Now, what Cara Malone did not tell you, before Europeans stepped foot on African soil, Africa had universities. Africa had astronomy. They had medicine. They had architecture. Africa had mathematics, y'all. The same mathematics that they came and took. You remember that, Cara Malone? Irrigation systems. They had public bathhouses, toilets. Europe didn't even have toilets. They were still tossing their urine and such out of the window. Now, who was more advanced? And Africa was so far advanced for 4,000 years. Karl Malone was intentionally trying to rewrite history to make people like her with the colonizer mentality feel good about themselves, to make them look like they were good people. But instead they were thieves, they were liars, they were murderers, they were rapists. That's the truth. They were so enamored at the brilliance of Africa that they came and ravaged the land, took people into slavery, killed people, and transported people all across the waters so they can claim African spoil as their own. They wanted to rebrand everything that Africa had as their own. Their clothing, hello, Louis Vuitton, hello, Prada, hello, Fendi, hello, Givenchy. All these names, those were African patterns. You know that now. This is why I wrote Lies America Has Told Black People. Because these are not just lies told here in America. These are global lies, y'all. And it's ridiculous. Because it's not the truth. You want to know the truth? Get my book. You can look in the bio. Click the link there is at the very top. Get the book. Read it for yourself. It's time that you know the truth. Because they're going to continue to tell you lies. And if you don't know it for yourself, you're going to believe it. Get my book. Karl Malone, you ought to be ashamed of yourself.
It's so infuriating that these programs have spent the last 30 years telling Caribbean governments that they can't invest in people. We have to invest in our people. We have to deal with the historical injustices of a lack of education and a lack of investment in our own societies, our own culture. So I think that's at the heart of it. That's for me, the heart of reparations about that is that investment. Now, some people might say, well, where is this money going to come from and why? So, you're located in the heart of empire, right? There have been so many studies, the legacies of British slave ownership, the monies that were literally paid out by British taxpayer dollars to British slave owners and plantation owners, billions of dollars. What has continued to sustain, British power and the power that of resources, the power of the means of production, the power to control and invest and increase the wealth that was created. So there's no longer this question of, we can't figure it out. We can absolutely figure it out. We know where the money went.
Do you support reparations for American descendants of slaves? How can you possibly justify taking money through force taxation from someone today who was never a slaver, whose families were never slavers, who has never been involved in slavery in any way, and giving it to someone today who was never a slave, who has never been a slave, whose parents weren't slaves, whose grandparents weren't slaves? None of that is to diminish the horror of slavery, but to say that reparations is a nutso solution.
Did America benefit from slavery?
I didn't.
But did America's history benefit from slavery?
I mean, no.
All right, so I'm going to ask this very, very, very directly. It's a very way of wording this. Did your parents receive anything from the New Deal, and specifically Social Security?
Perhaps not yet. They probably will.
So
perhaps
you don't
Social Security.
Yeah, American descendants of slaves were excluded from Social Security as a means of public policy. So when you look at the position that American descendants of slaves are in, that's generational poverty. So you're going to have to be very explicit about the reason why you're doing this thing. We have to recognize that the assets were taken from American descendants of slaves, and it's the federal government's job to redress
Hundreds of years ago, I would have supported it at the time.
At the time, we're talking about the 80s, my friend.
We're talking about slavery.
We're talking about as recent as... No. Let's not do that. If we stay on slavery, we're going to be stuck there forever. It's slavery that led to Jim Crow, that led to redlining, that led to the war on poverty, that led to the war on drugs, that led to situations that even your partner cited.
Yeah, and
And that's the government's job.
But you want to respond to that today by discriminating again on the basis of race,
It's
reinforcing the divides. Again, instead of, I mean, we can't go back and change the past. We have to move forward without reinforcing divides, without discriminating on the basis of race, without taking from one group to give to another. We have to move forward for equality for all, not try to look backward and
So after carefully listening to this video, here is my deep critical analysis. You see, reparations are advocated for the enslaved and the colonized as a necessary measure for justice, acknowledgement, and redress for historical and ongoing harms, which continue to manifest in present-day systemic inequalities. You see, arguments for reparations generally fall into three main categories. We have the moral, which is also the ethical. We have the economic, and also we have the legal. So reparations, if we want to discuss it, we must look at these three domains. The moral, which is also the ethical. We have to look at the economic, and we also have to look at the legal. The legal is now what deals with the constitutional or the law itself. So we will start with the moral or the ethical imperatives. Reparations are viewed, under this domain, reparations are viewed as a moral obligation to recognize the profound and enduring harm caused by slavery and colonialism, which have been declared crimes against humanity by international bodies. Acknowledgement of wrongdoings. Reparation starts with a formal acknowledgement and apology for the atrocities committed, which is essential for historical truth and healing. First, you confess with your mouth, right? Just say, I did wrong, I enslaved you, I am sorry, forgive me. So hard for some people to do that. After the acknowledgement, we have the restorative justice. Here we have the principle of restoration. Bring back the loot, that which you took, return it. Even if your father or grandfather gave you, it is a fruit of loot, return it. See, they are a core component of restorative justice. Restorative justice prioritizes the repair of harm suffered by victims and their descendants, rather than solely focusing on punishing perpetrators. Also, we'll have to look at the human dignity under this ethical dimension. So slavery and colonialism were systems built on the systemic denial of human rights and dignity, and reparations seeks to restore this dignity, right? Now, the second domain is the economic disparities. These historical crimes created and cemented immense wealth disparities that persist today between groups and between former colonial and colonized nations, right? So another thing we have is uncompensated labor and theft. The massive wealth of colonizing and enslaving states and institutions was built directly to enslave the laborers, right? And the uncompensated labor of these enslaved people and the extraction of resources from colonized lands, right? For example, in some cases, slave owners received compensation for the loss of property upon abolition, while the enslaved received nothing, right? Very powerful. See, if you call up upon the name of Jesus Christ, confess with your mouth and say that he died for your sins and he rose from the dead on the third day, you shall be saved. That is also a way of reparations, because when we sin, we owe God an apology. We owe him a repentance. Reparation takes many forms. It takes many images. It takes many variations. But the principle is one, and I have shared with you those principles. Right? So I will repeat this part. apart. For example, in some cases, slave owners received compensation for the loss of property upon abolition, while the enslaved received nothing. If it is going to be reparations and if it's going to be justice, it should be on both sides. And who really should be served justice in this case? Is it not the enslaved or the enslaver? I believe it is the enslaved. So another one, we have structural inequality. Post-emancipation and post-independence policies such as the Jim Crow laws and land theft. Also, let's add discriminatory housing and financial policies. See, these things ensured that the descendants of the enslaved and colonized could not accumulate generational wealth, leading to the vast racial and global wealth gaps that we see today. Underdevelopment. Colonialism actively underdeveloped colonized nations by destroying local economies, political structures, and educational systems, leaving behind infrastructures designed only for resource extraction, a legacy that continues to affect their economic standing. So let's now look at the legal domain of reparation, right? The call for reparation is increasingly grounded in the principles of international law regarding human rights violations. First one is right to remedy. International human rights law confirms that victims of human rights violation have a right to a remedy and reparation that is adequate, effective, and prompt. The legacies of slavery and colonialism are seen as ongoing human rights violation due to their persistence of systemic racism and inequality, right? Another thing we should look at is addressing this structural racism. Contemporary international human rights bodies recognize that the legacies of these historical injustices are inextricably linked to a present-day racial discrimination and inequality, making reparation a duty to transform these ongoing structures. What is the precedent? There is a historical precedent for reparations to be paid to groups that have suffered state-sanctioned harm. For instance, we have reparations to Japanese Americans interned during the World War III, right? So here are the forms of reparations as we close up. Reparations are not limited to financial payments. Listen up, it's not about money only. They encompass a variety of measures aimed at holistic redress. First, we have restitution. Restitution is a way to, restitution measures to restore what was lost, such as the return of land or cultural artifacts. We have compensation, financial payments for economic accessible damages, including lost wages and stolen wealth. We have the third one as rehabilitation, provision of medical, psychological, and social services to address the deep-seated intergenerational trauma and health deficits. The last one is satisfaction. No monetary measures like official apologies, truth and reconciliation reconciliation processes, and public commemoration. So satisfaction is adhering to these, what I have told you, such as non-monetary measures like official apologies, truth and reconciliation processes, and public commemoration, right? So we also have guarantees of non-repetition, institutional reforms, educational changes, and policy changes to prevent future harms and dismantle structures of racial inequality is important to address this big issue of reparations. So my question to you is this: that woman with whom she's very, very adamant in refusing black people should not get reparations, what do you think of her? Is she right? After learning all this, is she right? Or is she wrong? Or is she ignorant? the answer falls in either of those three. Yeah. Guys, I hope you've had an important time listening to this. Be sure to subscribe. I'll surely appreciate. And see you in the next one.